Well, good afternoon, everybody. Realize that people here, you might have to gather a little closer to see the screen. We also sent out the link to this presentation by Voyant Alert. So if you have that, you'll have the link and you can just view it on your phone or on your computer if you're at home. But we have Terri Lang, who is a weather specialist from Environment Canada, and she's going to give us a presentation on severe weather safety, particularly the type of storms we can see in the summer here. So we're going to turn it over to Terri here. If anybody has questions, you wave at me and we'll let Terri answer your questions after her presentation. But if everybody wants to gather around here so you can see the screen a little better, apologize, it's not quite as awesome as we hoped it would be for visibility. But Terri, if you're ready to go, over to you.
Okay, I'll get going then. Okay, my name is Terri Lang and I'm a warning preparedness meteorologist with Environment and Climate Change Canada. And I'm stationed in Saskatoon. I've been here now for, 9 years. I was in BC for 17 years. And before that, I was in Saskatchewan. Before that, I was in Manitoba, but I am Saskatchewan born and raised. So I'm quite familiar with the weather here. So I'm just here to talk about summer severe weather safety, just because we're coming into that season quickly. And we want everybody to be prepared. I know you guys had that big event a couple of years ago with the tornadoes in the provincial parks. So probably scared some people. So we want to get people prepared for that. And do stop me if you do have questions or anything like that. Just want to make sure that there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the bulletins that we issue from Environment Canada, what severe storms are, and the types of safety. Okay, so these are the types of bulletins generally that we issue in the summer. Heavy rainfall warnings, and those have to do with really big, not with thunderstorms specifically, but with big weather systems that cross the province, like the one that is coming up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Everyone's going to feel that across the prairies. Wind warnings, dust storm warnings, which we're kind of getting out of that season now with the crops coming up. Severe thunderstorms, of course, tornadoes, funnel cloud advisories, and after last year, we got very familiar with extreme heat warnings, and of course, also with air quality warnings. They often come hand in hand, unfortunately. Okay, and this is something I really want to emphasize, is that we want to make sure that people have a way to get our severe weather bulletins. Almost everybody has cell phones, almost everybody, and we recognize that not everybody does have cell phones. And often when you're out and about, maybe camping or on the lake or something, the last thing you want to do is connect to technology. However, we do want you guys to be safe. So the best way to get our severe thunderstorm or any of our warnings is with the WeatherCan app. This is it down here, the WeatherCan app. So if you don't have that on your phone, you can download that. And what it does is you can specify which locations you want to get bulletins for. So maybe where you live, or maybe you want to monitor where grandma lives or something like that, or your cousin or something. So you can identify that as well. But it also, the phone, if you're traveling around, the phone follows you. So if you're somewhere else and a warning comes out for where you are, instead of being at home, it'll push the warning to you as well. So Sask Alert app is another great app to get our warnings. You can also get a whole bunch of other neat warnings if you're into that kind of stuff. Our weather radios are kind of getting out of date, but there's the radio, there's the TV, our website at weather.gc.ca. Some of the other phone apps do push the warnings out, but also if you're Twitter fanatic, go to #SKStorm and you can get the warnings and stuff like that there, and lots of neat pictures and people losing their minds over weather. Okay, so the difference between watches and warnings, and this is we find this every year that there's confusion with this. So when we issue a thunderstorm watch, it's kind of what it sounds like. It's time to watch for the potential for severe weather. That means the atmosphere is primed. All the ingredients are there to make severe weather. So just kind of be paying attention. When we issue a warning, that means that severe weather is occurring or is imminent, and you need to take action immediately. So same with tornado watches and tornado warnings. I know a couple of years ago, some tornado watches went out and people really lost their minds because they didn't quite understand that it didn't mean that tornadoes were dropping out of the sky imminently. It just meant that the potential was there. So I wanted to, this is probably the best slide I've ever seen about the differences between a watch and a warning. So we equate it to cupcakes. So a cupcake watch indicates that there's all the ingredients there that we need to make cupcakes. So your butter and eggs and all that kind of stuff. And all alone, that's just it. That's just all the ingredients. But if things to come together just right, we can get those cupcakes going. So when you hear watch, think about, okay, everything's there. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. But as soon as you hear a warning, you know that it's cupcake time. So I hope you guys get the difference between that and kind of get that in your mind. And severe thunderstorms, we want to emphasize that each thunderstorm is dangerous in itself because of the presence of lightning. So we always want people to remember that because they think, oh, it's just a farty little thunder shower or whatever. But of course, lightning kills and injures more people in Canada than tornadoes do each year. So something to keep in mind. But it's those severe thunderstorms that have the really heavy rains, large hail, damaging winds, what we call plow winds here on the prairies, and tornadoes. Those are the ones that we send out the warnings for. And they're only a small percentage of all the thunderstorms. They're only about 5 to 10%. So we talked about those heavy rainfall warnings associated with bigger systems that cover provinces and stuff like that. But we can also have the heavy rain associated with severe thunderstorms. And we just had one go through Rosthern the other day. I was looking at it. They got about 43 millimeters in 1 hour and about 63.5 total in less than 2 hours. So that flooded the town of Rosthern. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about heavy rains associated with thunderstorms. I think we've all been in one of those cloud bursts, and the rain just seems to pour like buckets out of the sky. So it can quickly overwhelm sewer systems. So we ask people to always make sure that your drains are clear of leaves and garbage, and always point your eaves away from your house, not towards your house. And if you have a sewer cap, put that on. We had one in my parents' house in Regina, which is a very floody place. And we bailed more than once in my parents' house, let me tell you, from thunderstorms. So. And when we talk about flooding safety, we always say turn around, don't drown. That's a US thing. We poached that from the US because you don't know what is under that water. You don't know if the road's been washed away. You don't know if there's holes, craters created by the flooding. And this is kind of an interesting fact that it only takes about 18 inches of water to float a car, and only 6 inches of moving water to sweep you off your feet. So that's why we want people to, be very cautious around flooded roadways and stuff like that, because it is quite dangerous. And in the States, we do have deaths from flash flooding and stuff like that. It's not as common in Canada, but certainly, we had some in BC from the last year from the atmospheric river events. We had some people that were washed away in waters and stuff like that. So anyway, but turn around, don't drown is sort of the rule of thumb. Okay, so hail safety. And this is always a tough one too, because hail can be really, it's more damaging than dangerous. But if you're outside and that, you can imagine that, seeing those hailstones coming down on your head. Yeah. So we always tell people to move indoors. And when we say get under the protection, under protection, we don't say awning necessarily, because when you stand under an awning, you're not safe from lightning. But if that's your only option, then get underneath that. We ask you to come inside, get away from windows and glass doors and skylights, because the hail can smash through those quite easily. It takes only about golf ball size hail to start really doing a lot of damage and smashing through windows and stuff, especially if there's a wind associated with it. If you're in a vehicle, pull over where it's safe to do so and when to do so. And protect yourself from possible shattered glass. That does happen, especially storm chasers. They tend to have a lot of broken glass in their cars. But we see this every year. We just saw this last week in Calgary. It starts hailing and everybody pulls under the underpass, which is incredibly unsafe. I know it protects your car, but it also stops emergency vehicles from passing and plugs up traffic, which is a real nightmare. So don't go under an underpass. It's also not safe during tornadic events. So, and keeping in mind that hardtop vehicles offer some protection, but yeah, certainly not the soft top from convertibles. So dust storms, or haboobs, we call them. Like I said, we're coming out of the season. We tend to get these in the spring and in the fall, when the crops are either haven't come out, are emerging, or they've come off the field. And these strong winds usually come up on a really strong cold front. So we can get strong wind gusts with them. But what they do is they pick up the dust, and they can very, very quickly reduce visibility to near zero. So they usually don't last very long, maybe 15 minutes, half an hour. So we tell people to pull over where and when it's safe to do so, and to wait for the storm to pass and for the visibility to improve. So I think we're coming out of that season now. We've had some good rain so far, so that's good. Okay, so damaging winds, straight line winds. Now, here on the prairies, about a third of all the severe weather events that we get are from winds alone, just the winds. So that doesn't account for the flooding and the hail and the tornadoes. Most of them are wind events. And any wind gust greater than about 90 kilometers per hour will pose a hazard to you. We all call them sort of downbursts, but on the prairies here, we kind of call them plow winds. And they're sort of, they're straight line winds that come out of thunderstorms. And most people on the prairies, when they see have damage done to their property or whatever it is, they automatically assume it's a tornado. And that's not necessarily the case. And usually, and for the most part, it's not the case at all. It's usually straight line winds. And I think everybody saw, it was just a few weeks ago, that derecho, that huge wind event that went through southern Ontario into Quebec. 11 people lost their lives in that, and mostly from fallen trees. And one person was in a boat that got capsized and they drowned. So these types of events should be taken very, very seriously. They cause so much damage on the prairies. And these winds can reach very, very strong wind speeds, as high as a EF2 tornado. So people don't realize that these types of winds can cover a much larger area, width-wise and lengthwise. Tornado paths tend to be quite narrow and often short, but plow winds tend to be wide, and they can go for a very, very long time. And as we saw with the derecho in Ontario, Quebec, that was over 1,000 kilometers long, if you can imagine. So just keep that in mind. So I also wanted to specify the difference between funnel clouds and tornadoes. We've already had a number of funnel clouds. We've also had 2 landspout tornadoes. There was one near Maymont on Friday. So we can get these little funnels, like the one that you see there, coming from the bottom of the clouds. And they're often caused by a bit of interaction within the atmosphere, maybe some different boundaries coming together. But they're not necessarily rotating all the way down to the ground. So they're not doing damage. They can, but for the most part, they kind of just hang out in the sky and then they just kind of dissipate. And we usually put a funnel cloud advisory out for that, just so people kind of know the difference and they don't freak out when they see these funnels, even though we always tell people, we'll keep an eye on it and make sure it's not touching the ground. But if it does touch the ground, we do call it a tornado. And here we talked about our little landspout tornadoes. And we do make a differentiation between landspout tornadoes and other types of tornadoes, the bigger tornadoes, but we want to emphasize that all tornadoes are dangerous. It doesn't matter if it's a land spout or not. I talked about those boundaries coming together, and often they're very weak boundaries, but they can cause a little bit of rotation in the atmosphere, and sometimes it can come down and connect with the ground. Sometimes it starts from the bottom and goes to the top. So these landspout tornadoes can do damage. They're often weak, but they're often they don't last very long, and they're quite erratic. But they can cause damage, which we've seen numerous occasions. So we're doing here on safety. Okay, so this is the classic photo. This is a guy from Alberta. This is what you don't do. So if there's and that would be what we consider a landspout tornado. You don't go mow your lawn. I don't know why he needed to mow his lawn when there's a tornado coming, but priorities, I guess. Anyway, so the best place to be is in a basement or a storm cellar, if you have a storm cellar, away from windows and doors. You want to put as many walls as you can between yourself and the outside. So most people like to look out the window and watch, but most of the people are killed or injured by flying debris. So down as far as you can. If you don't have a basement, go into an inner closet. Bathrooms are also good. They may have windows, but there's piping in the walls that actually reinforce the walls a little bit. So you can crawl into the bathtub, cover yourself with a blanket or a cushion or something like that to avoid all the debris flying around. So here's what I'm talking about is flying debris that comes from tornadoes. And this is a picture of this man. He was, this kid was home alone, and he went into the bathroom, and you can see, he showed where he hid, and you can see that he survived by going into the bathroom, and you can see the rest of the house is completely gone. So that's what we tell people. If you're in a high-rise building or a condo building, we ask it to get down to the lowest floor. The parking garage, if it's on the main floor, it's usually okay, but sunken parking garages are not necessarily safe because there might be flooding. But we're wanting you to get low and to get away from windows and doors. That's what we're trying to, in interior hallways, anything like that, that'll protect you from the winds. And if you go to the Saskatoon airport here, the tornado shelter is actually the bathroom. So makes sense. Oh, I hope this works. And this is why we don't want you to go into large span buildings during tornadoes. And that means like hockey rinks, shopping malls, that type of thing. Because what happens is often the roof gets ripped off. And then you can see all the debris kind of goes into the middle of the arena or whatever, and then kind of swirls around or whatever. Also, when the roof is gone, the walls are weakened, so the walls can also collapse as well. So that's why we always tell people, no, do not go, get away from the large span buildings, go into an interior room there, like a bathroom or a hallway or something like that, but stay out of the large span roofs. That's why. Outside, and this is, we always struggle with telling people what to do when they're camping or when they're outside, just because there's no safe place outside during strong winds and tornadoes. I mean, of course, we saw that in Provincial Park there. We've had a couple other plow wind events in other provincial parks and seen quite a bit of damage. There's one from Emma Lake, and you can see what a tree does to a trailer. So we want you to find the most sturdy place that you can. In a campground, often it's the bathroom because they're made out of either cement or wood or whatever. They're safer than a trailer because often trailers they're kind of flimsy. Cars or trucks, also another option, but you have to be low because the falling trees are always an issue. So you're trying to make the best out of the worst situation or a bad situation. So we really struggle with this. Okay, so if you're in a boat and a storm approaches, head to shore at the first sign of bad weather. either you get an alert, the skies start darkening, the winds are picking up. Don't wait till the last minute because the winds ahead of the storm can start making waves, and you can easily it can swamp the boat, like we saw that woman perish in Ontario with the derecho event. You're also not safe from lightning when you're in a boat because you tend to be the tallest thing around. If you have a closed cabin, it's okay, but get off the lakes as quickly as possible. And if you can find a sturdy shelter, sturdy building, please go to that. Okay, I want to stop there before I go into lightning and lightning safety and see if there's any questions. I hear nothing. Now I am.
Okay. Yeah, if anybody in the audience has any questions for Terri, just come on up or raise your hand. Have to be careful not to get the mic in front of the speakers here, or we get dreadful noises. I see somebody coming up now who has a question. So come on up, Mr. Sir. Yeah. I'll get you to talk into the phone and the mic so that Terri can hear you and everybody else.
What is the average distance tornado will actually travel?
The average distance is actually pretty short, especially in Canada. The paths tend to be short, usually less than a kilometer. But of course, we can get long-lasting ones, but those tend to be quite rare. So it's usually less than a kilometer. And we ask people how wide a tornado is. People think, oh, they're kilometers wide, but for the most part, they're actually not very wide. You know, the ones you see in the States, we tend to not get a lot of those in Canada. You know, the ones that are ginormous and they're a mile wide and go, 30 miles or whatever, we tend to not get those. Doesn't mean that they can't happen here. But yeah, it's usually, the path is usually less than a kilometer, but it can be longer.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And anybody else got a question for Terri at this point? I don't see any hands, so carry on, Terri.
Okay, thank you. So lightning and lightning safety. And I want to emphasize this because I worked on the lightning file for a number of years and it's eye-opening. Okay, so I don't have to tell anybody this because they could probably tell me this, that we tend to get the most lightning in the summer months, of course, with July being the most popular month for lightning in Canada. We can get lightning during any month of the year. It's quite rare, of course, in the winter, but it can happen. We did see it a few strikes this winter. But yeah, it starts ramping up in May, highest in July, and then starts tapering off in September. And there is a reason for that. And it has to do with the availability of moisture that feeds and creates the thunderstorms. And most of that moisture actually comes from crops. It's called evapotranspiration. And when the crops are growing, they give off tremendous amounts of moisture. So that moisture is used to form thunderstorms. And of course, thunderstorms by definition have lightning in them. So that's why in July, we have that peak of lightning. And then when the crops start to mature, we start seeing the thunderstorms start to taper off and severe weather start to taper off, usually by the end of August, even though we can still get some storms. Last year was a real freak year because it was so dry. So dry, and it was dry across all of Western Canada. And of course, then we got the wildfires and that was it. We had very few tornadoes, had very little lightning last year. So I think I have a graph. Where's my graph? There it is. And this shows the number of lightning strikes in Saskatchewan from year to year. And with the number of lightning strikes is on the left-hand side and the year is on the bottom. So you can see last year over here was one of the slower years for lightning because of that whole drought and dryness factor. Yeah. Okay, and here's a map of sort of number of days that people can expect thunder showers in Saskatchewan. You can see that southeast corner tends to get most of them, most of the days with thunder and lightning. And that's because we have a lot that form in the United States and then they tend to drift over that southeast corner. But you can also see where you guys are at, that there's another kind of little maximum over there. And that's the leftover stuff then from the thunderstorms that form off the Rockies and drift through Alberta and then drift into Saskatchewan. So interesting that Lakeland across the central part of the province also has a little bit of a maximum of days with thunder. And this is no surprise either to anybody that the thunderstorms tend to be most active in the late afternoon and evening time. That's because maximum temperature usually occurs around, in the summer, usually occurs around 4 or 5 o'clock. Most people think it's when the sun is highest, which is around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's not, because the sun shines down onto the ground starts warming up, and then the ground starts actually emitting heat. So that's, by the time that sun's up at 1, it's warming up the ground, and then it starts giving off the heat. So that's why it's around 4 or 5 o'clock, and that's the maximum time that thunderstorms are, because they're driven by the heat of the sun, but not necessarily. You can see sort of usually, you finally drifted off to sleep, and then in the middle of the night, around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden you get woken up by these big thunderstorms, and those are called what we call nocturnal thunderstorms. And those are capable of sort of going through the night because there's other processes in the atmosphere at work that are keeping those thunderstorms going. And nocturnal thunderstorms are actually the most dangerous because you can't see what's coming. And you're also asleep, so you're not necessarily hearing warnings, or you're not necessarily prepared for it. So, and sometimes in the morning, early in the morning, we have a little bit of a peak. And those are those leftover ones that kind of fiddle around in the morning, and then they fizzle out and then redevelop somewhere else down the line. Oh, this is one of my favorite videos. I don't know if you guys can hear the audio, but so this is why we tell you not to stand under a tree during thunderstorms. Because not only is the tree struck by lightning, it also breaks in half and comes down and smashes everything. So anyway, I love that video. There is no safe place outside during a lightning storm. That's just kind of the bottom line. So our rule of thumb is when thunder roars, go indoors. So if you can hear thunder or if you can see lightning, it's time to go inside. And inside, when we say inside, we mean a house, cabin, a vehicle, and remain in the shelter for a full 30 minutes after the last rumble of thunder. And everyone goes, well, why? It stopped raining. Why can't I go out? But what the studies have shown is 1/3 of all lightning deaths and injuries occur before the storm actually hits, meaning the rain before it hits, and 1/3 occur after the storm has passed. That means people aren't seeking shelter soon enough, and they're coming out of the shelter too early. Because what happens is we can have these lightning strikes that can squirt out ahead of the storm. They can also squirt out the back. And there's been documented cases of lightning traveling over 200 kilometers from a cloud. So we generally, you don't see that very often. But the general rule of thumb is the lightning can travel 10 to 20 kilometers from a lightning cloud. So that's why we say, if you can hear thunder, if you can see lightning, it's time to seek shelter. We used to say, if you can count 30 seconds between the thing. And we've said, no, don't do that because you're wasting precious time. You could be seeking shelter and, while you're counting or whatever, right? So here's another case. You can see the lightning storm is well past, but here's this lightning strike kind of squirting out the back there. So we say for the shelter is a solidly constructed building away from windows, doors, plumbing. So don't take a shower. Don't use landline phones, but everyone's going to laugh because very few people have landline phones anymore. So I know they still exist. And I remember my parents, off the phone during a thunderstorm, but you're not attached to it anymore. So cars and trucks are safe. And most people think it's because of the rubber tires. It is not. It is just because of what's called the Faraday effect, Faraday cage effect. Lightning comes down, the charge moves around the outside of the car or the truck and moves through and into the ground. Sometimes the tires are blown. Sometimes the electronics are blown in the car. but you're safe. If you're caught outside, and we always say you shouldn't be caught outside, just because if you're paying attention, you will seek shelter before something happens. If you're caught outside, get to shelter immediately. We say do go to a low-lying area, but do not lie flat, because if lightning strikes nearby, you will absorb that whole charge into your body. So in the worst case scenario, you would crouch down with your feet together and cover your ears, which is dreadful advice. And I mean that's lightning safety. And that's the worst case scenario if you haven't been able to find any shelter. Yeah. So lightning likes water, it likes metal, it likes tall objects, poles, trees, etc., and open areas. And every year we have reports of people standing under trees getting struck by lightning, because often what happens is, and you can see in that video, but what also can happen is the lightning will travel down the tree and it'll jump from the tree onto you. It does that, or it comes down through the ground, and the charge spreads out. And if you're in contact with the ground, which you are underneath the tree, then you could get that charge as well. And then if things break off, you can see how fast the tree exploded from the heat of the lightning. And you could, that would be also quite dangerous. So, and keeping in mind that lightning always doesn't hit the tallest objects. So, people always tell me this has happened to them. If you feel your hair start to stand on end, the hair in your arms start to tingle or whatever, you are in danger of being struck by lightning almost immediately. So you have to, immediately, seek shelter. And if none is available, and like I said, do that crouching thing until that feeling has passed. But the lightning is trying to come through you and connect. So, and this picture it's a very famous picture. It was taken down in the States, and there's a number of people down there, and they all took pictures, and they thought it was quite cool, that it was quite, funny that their hair was standing on end. And then all of a sudden it got really cold and it started hailing. So they all left. And then there was a huge lightning strike. A number of them were killed, and some of the rest of them were injured. So from that lightning strike. And this is what, I'm trying to get across to you, is having that awareness of the risk, knowing, okay, there's a watch out today. We should be watching for this, the sky to see what's coming, having a way of getting alerts, and this is a picture from Jackfish Lake from a few years ago. And you can clearly see that there's a really dark cloud. There's some lightning there, but look at how many people are still on the beach. And, so maybe these people here are starting to pull up. Maybe this kid's starting to, maybe he should go. Probably not. He's probably just playing with something. And this guy is looking out to the lake, and he's just totally not even paying attention. This is the time when you actually leave the beach, not when the storm comes upon you. We also have our Canadian lightning danger map on our website. Sadly, it's not in our app yet, and I wish it was, but that's a whole other story. But this shows you where your potential is. That red dot shows you where the potential for the next lightning strikes are based on the lightning strikes that are happening. It's actually one of the only ones in the world that does that. And again, with this, it starts with being prepared. Know what the weather forecast is calling for. Be prepared to change or alter your plans. Monitor the weather. Know what to do. Have a plan. Know what to do. And if inclement weather approaches, seek shelter. Don't wait till it's too late. Every year we hear this. It came out of nowhere. And in BC, when we lived in BC, I'm like, okay, well, there's mountains in the way, but in Saskatchewan, you can see storms coming for hours. So it came out of nowhere. Anyway, okay. So, and here's, this is another picture. This is taken from Lloydminster, about 2 years ago. This big, massive shelf cloud coming towards these players who they're still playing baseball. And as soon as this cloud would have gone over top of them, the winds were probably gusting to about 80 to 90 kilometers per hour. There was big hail in this storm, but they're still out there playing. You would have been able to see lightning, you would have been able to hear thunder, and the game hadn't been called yet. And this stuff like this makes me nuts. So anyway, so I tried to go through as much as I could. I can go on endlessly, but I was told I had a time limit. So I wanted to open up again for any questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Terry. And yeah, are there any questions out there in the crowd? Put your hand up. Well, you mentioned the air standing on end, and I recall a soccer game many years ago where that very thing happened, and nobody got hit by lightning. But I'm guessing that we were very close.
Yes, you were lucky.
And I have one question.
Sure.
Pardon me if you addressed it, but if you're out on a boat, are you safer to stay in the boat or try to get to shore?
You're safer to get to shore. Because often with, even if you have a cabin, like a cabin will protect you from the lightning. But even if you have that cabin, often there's strong winds that come with thunderstorms and it can easily swamp your boat. So you're much better off getting to shore. We have so many examples of people just, their boats getting flipped or getting swamped or whatever. So always get to shore when there's a thunderstorm, always.
Okay. Well, thank you, Terry. I don't see any other questions from the audience here. We have recorded this, and so we will be rebroadcasting it for everyone who couldn't be here today. I'd like to thank you very much for getting up your Sunday afternoon to be with us.
My pleasure. I wish I could have been there.
Go ahead.
I said, I wish I could have been there. I'm sorry that, it's my pleasure to do this. I wish I could have been there with you all.
Well, we'll look forward to having you here in person someday soon.
Sure.
And with that, have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much for giving us this presentation.
My pleasure.